So, hi Eric, welcome back.
Wow, welcome.
Yeah, today is the Builder Day or BLD Day.
Yeah, today's the builder day. Yeah, I think we left it open
Yeah.
the last talk, and we talked about my journey to get to BLD to Rife, which got me to BLD. So let me give you a little bit of background story. So I got into Rife. I converted my blog to Rife after 23 years of running my own stuff. And so I just hang out on the Discord channel with Gert, and we were just shooting the breeze and kind of both bitching about how much we dislike Gradle.
Mm-hmm.
And the conversation came into is like, we could do like a pure Java thing, right? And he actually like totally took control over it and was like, I'm going to work on it. And I didn't write a line of code. And we started testing it on the channel with a few other people that were there off and on, and adding a few things here and there, and I think my contribution was more questions and things like that. I mean, he did most of the code work. I didn't start doing code until we started doing extensions. So it kind of moved pretty quickly. I mean, he's a pretty fast programmer, I got to tell you, a lot faster than I am. And so before you know it, we had something that we could actually test.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I did a lot of the testing, no doubt about it. We did a lot of things to work out, the Maven properties to be able to download the dependencies and so forth. A lot of different things, I push for having an extension system uh, because when I work with Cedric on Cobalt, that's what I worked on. I worked on writing extension for the system. So just as a refresher, Cobalt is Cedric Tech. A few years back, he decided to write a builder system in Kotlin.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, back then, the documentation was non-existent
Mm-hmm.
for the Kotlin compiler. And I made it really, really hard to maintain because each time they made a tiny little change, it would break things
Mm-hmm.
up. So the project never really took off.
Mm-hmm.
But to me, doing a pure Java solution was the next best thing, and so that's basically the birth of BLD, and so we started doing a little bit of promotion and so forth, and I went around and started converting my projects to BLD. So I've to this day I've converted about 60 different projects to BLD,
Mm-hmm.
which in turn made me want to create extensions. Things that I would do, like for example, using Jacoco, for what is it called?
Code coverage.
Code coverage, things like that. Using TestNG instead of using JUnit.
Why
You
that?
know,
Why TestNG and not JUnit?
well, I mean, that's a good question. I've been using TestNG mostly myself.
Mm-hmm.
That's mostly why. I mean, TestNG 5, JUnit 5 is definitely very nice too. Don't get me wrong. I just wanted. I was just thinking, like, what I did? I went to the Gradle plugin page and I sorted by most popular,
Mm-hmm.
and saw what the most popular plugins were, and that basically came down to TestNG, code coverage, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I just implemented those. We have one for PIT testing,
Mm-hmm.
which I forgot what it stands for. It's PIT.
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I have about 12 different
Mutation
plugins.
test. So PyTest is
Yeah.
which
And
is
then,
interesting concept to the listener. So what PyTest does, it changes the code, business code, and expects that the asserts are failing. If they are not failing, means they are not good enough, right? So this is actually interesting.
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I bumped onto that, and I'm like, oh, that's really easy. So the extensions that I've created work in two different ways.
Mm-hmm.
If the tool that I'm using has an API, that's usually what I would go for. If not, I'll just call it from the command line, which ultimately I found is a better solution. Even so testng, for example, I'm calling from the command line. The pit stuff I'm calling from the command line. I'm a lot of check style. On the other hand, I think they have their own API, so I'm using that. But I've come to realize after writing 10 to 12 different extensions that use basically other tools that Gradle and Maven has just lied to us by telling us, oh, use this language, this that we have, this DSL that we have to use this plugin, you know. And ultimately, what it comes down to is you learning a new set of commands, which generally have nothing to do with how you would do it if you were using the tool from the command line. Simple example is like, I think most people don't know how to use the jar tool,
Yeah.
on their own because they use Maven or Gradle to do it, and that's basically a way to lock you into the system.
Yeah.
It's and I just found out that I learned a lot myself by writing tools, by writing extension that use other tools. I found out about things that I was not aware of. Because if you look at Gradle and Maven, you're not looking at a full implementation. You're looking at a subset implementation of what they consider to be the most popular features.
Yeah, but the philosophy is different, right? Because Maven, for instance, they are all about extreme convention over configuration and the phases,
Yep.
right? So they believe in the phases. So the project has the phases. What they also believe, the project has exactly one output. I mean, there's no more that strong that it was at the beginning. And the idea is, you don't care about what happens there. You just register the plugins to different phases, and then you go for it. So this was the the idea, and I liked Maven a lot because in my projects there were no plugin. We had already the conversation. So for typical Jakarta application, what I only had to do was the war plugin. And there was, as I remember, only one setting that the web XML is optional. This was the entire configuration. So it's like 5.
You probably had the Sunfire plugin too.
Surefire, you mean?
Yeah, Surefire. Yeah.
The Surefire now back then was not necessary. With Java 11 or 17, you need that. Before that, there was. I just went with conventions, and the cool story is in Maven, I could use properties. Instead of plugins. So I never used plugins. I had one war configuration. It is like 20 lines of code, and I was fine. Now, it's changed now recently if I started to use, Java as a scripting tool. Because in Maven, the problem is you have two problems. First, the dependencies, right? So if you configure the dependencies, they are downloaded to M2 repository somewhere, and they're not directly usable by me. This is the consequence. And then I need another plugin now, really, actually two plugins. One plugin which gathers the dependencies and creates a jar which is usable, Shade, for instance. And you need somehow exec plugin or the exec configuration in Maven to launch the main file. So, and for me, it was like, now for years, I built huge systems with 20 lines of Maven, right? And recently, I'm using no application server, nothing, just a main method, and I need suddenly 100 lines of Maven code, which is even longer than Java. And I actually tried Builder because I had to implement, for me, a small tool which converts JSON to HTML, and I only need one single dependency. I actually did it today. A dependency, and this is the JSON reader.
Yeah.
And so I took a look at Builder and said, okay, what's the deal? And the difference is you specify the dependency. It is downloaded to folder in your project. So I think build dist. Then, the Visual Studio Code already saw this because it is in the class path. And now the cool part is I don't need a plugin. I just say build, compile, run. So I immediately create a run script. So, and the consequence is a little bit different in Maven. I thought, should I create an executable jar and put it to my path? But with Builder, I consider the entire thing as an app. I say, I don't care actually, right? So I use the Builder run and it runs. I don't have to create, even to package the thing. It starts and does something. It's almost like a live code, right?
Yeah, and another factor too is that you actually don't have specifically to specify the dependency in the build file. You can just drag the jar. We have multiple folders. We have compile, runtime, standalone, and so forth. You can just drag it where it belongs, or we even have a folder for provided things, and so you don't even have to put it in your build file. You could just drag the jar file if you wanted to,
And to the listeners, what I did, I just downloaded the jar from GitHub, so the jar file, then run the jar, and this is kind of a wizard, and said create project. So, and what happens there, you get two files. One is called build. It ends with build, and the prefix depends what you set. What's the project name? And it extends from the projects. And then basically, if you know Maven, so it will ask you about package name. What's your main class, which is nice. So I could specify immediately the main class and the version of your entire thing. And then repositories list of Maven Central. So Maven Central is like a default. And in my case, I have a Jupyter JUnit dependency and my JSON dependency, and this is basically it. So and this and if you now I say build compile or build run, it picks the information and is done. And my app is a different file, and it is just vanilla app. So there is nothing. So it is more like build as code. So like the source code of the build and the app are in the same project but in different folders, right?
Yep. And that's what I found out after converting so many projects is I went from having extremely long Gradle build files to having extremely short build file. I needed to do things for some reason in Gradle. It seems like you always have to figure out a way to do something that they can't do. And that means using a Groovy, using a DSL, using a plugin, using this and that, where I can just write a few lines of Java code to do the same thing directly into Builder, and it's not a problem. What I've done with the extension is I've made it a little easier for some of the more common things, to be done. So let me give you like a concrete example. Like just last week, somebody came over on the Discord chat, and they asked if there was a way for us to use Gradle to build a native application with Builder. So first reaction from both of us was like, oh yes, you can write an extension for it. And then I started looking into it. And I realized that the only thing you need is to call the native.image file with a few properties. So I asked the person to send me their Maven file. So I took the Maven files and I converted it to Gradle, to BLD using our exec plugin, which lets you execute files. And it went from being like, 50 lines to being 3 lines. And it works. It's just that simple. And that just made me realize that, sometimes we're making our life a little too complicated, and it's a little bit better to go back to a more simpler approach, more direct approach.
Maybe I can tell you why. Because I think what happened with Maven is, if you call a tool from Java, right? So with the plugins, the
exec plugin,
no, whatever plugin. So if there's some tool behind, so I think your expectation is that there is native Java integration, right? But sometimes they are just using system exec. So they are just calling the command, and this doesn't make any sense because for historic reasons. So also in my case, I try to avoid to do this. So to just runtime, get runtime, and call something. So for application servers, it's probably threads and locking and whatever. But if you are in the build area, nothing against, right? You can just call it, and it is actually fairly simple and actually works really well. So you can even get the stream and communicate with the native thing. So it works actually perfectly in Java, right? So there's no concurrency as well. So if you're not starting threads, so it nothing can happen. So I'm with you. So you could actually have a way nicer integration. Maybe all the plugin system is too many abstraction layers. So this is the problem, And in
Yeah.
Builder, if you have the command line, you give me the command line, I call it, and you are done.
But if you have an API, same thing. If you have an API available, like test, for example, I have a Kotlin plugin. So at first I'm like, well, it would be nice to be able to compile a Kotlin code. And from working on Cobalt with Cedric, I was really, oh, it's going to be a pain in the ass. I mean, literally, And then, of course, now they released the K2 compiler, which has an API. There's a dependency that you download. So you download it and you can call it. So I use that, which in turn makes us one of the fastest compiler for Kotlin code on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing that would be faster is actually you issuing the command line by hand.
Mm-hmm.
We're faster than Gradle by. I mean, it's pathetic how faster we are.
Mm-hmm.
We're faster than IntelliJ IDE because it has to deal with all indexing and all those kind of things that it has to do before you can actually get your code going. So I noticed that Gradle just introduced this new thing where supposedly they're caching things and so forth. So I haven't really tested it. It might be a little faster, but I was blown how quickly I was able to get it going. And it's, I mean, Kotlin compiling is just like Java compiling. It's the same, they have their own executable, but it's the same syntax.
Mm-hmm.
It's no different. And right now I'm working on the KMP stuff, the multi-platform stuff. So the issue that I have with the multi-platform thing is two things. I've not released it for two reasons. One, it looks like they're working on the 2.0 compiler or Kotlin 2.0, and it looks like they're going to have a nice API for the embedded version of the native compilers, mm-hmm. which I'm thinking of using, although recently I was reading about it, there are some drawbacks. So I've kind of been holding off on releasing that because there's something coming out around the corner with Kotlin 2.0 that I think is going to make it a little bit easier.
Why are you still working on the multi-platform? Just for fun, or you need it?
Well, it's kind of funny. You remember the very first project that Gert and I was this URL encoder mm-hmm. To replace, the defective encoder in Java. And somebody approached me. So I made the Kotlin version, and Gert made the Java version, and and somebody approached me. It's like, hey, can you make it into a multi-platform version? Mm-hmm. Could use it with JavaScript and so forth. So I'm like, well, if you want to help me do it, yeah, because I had never done it, so I felt like that wasn't something I was. And so this guy called Adam, no last name, pretty much took it on, and we worked on it. I mean, it took a long time to get it going. And so now the URL encoder is multi-platform, so you can use it with JavaScript. You can create native libraries and so forth, which is cool.
Yeah.
So automatically, when I got that going, I'm like, well, how would I do that with BLD? And I can do it. I mean, I have it going on my machine. It's just right now, I don't think it's the right time to release it because I know there's something coming down the pipeline. Okay. And there's a few things that I need to work out too, as far as how do you upload all that stuff, because you don't have a jar, mm-hmm. right? You have what they call klibs, or you have executables, and you can all upload them to Maven Central, but it's a little bit complicated because you're building for multiple platforms at once. Mm-hmm. So I haven't quite figured out exactly how I want to handle that. But apart from that, it's fully functional mm-hmm. and fully working.
Back to BLD playing. Sure. What I thought today is that so the idea. So you have two files. One is the project, which it inherits from project, mm-hmm. is the build, and then is the application. But actually, you can make the project the application, right? I mean,
you can
because I mean, why the separation? Because I mean,
I guess you could. I mean, I don't think you could right now because I don't think you'd be able to build a jar. Mm-hmm. Because right now we don't use the so everything is separated in a folder, right? You have a BLD folder where you have your build file, and then you have your regular, main classes folder, your source classes folders, and so forth. And so I don't think right now you could make it work. You can make it run. Definitely. But as far as building a jar, I don't think that would work.
Not even jar. Going a step further, because if I thought about this, like the separation between the project and the class is somehow artificial, because in my particular case, it's more like a script, right? So I don't bother to see the dependency there, because if I have something to do, I will have to open, modify it anyway, and then run it, right? So and the next thing would be Java 22 multi-source. We could have a builder from source, right? So
I mean, we haven't really talked about it, but it's an interesting proposition, that's for sure. I mean, that becomes like a single tool, and I definitely understand your point of view. Everybody's got different ways of using things, right? Even Gert and I use things completely differently. He likes not having to deal with dependencies, and I'm the kind of guy that has a script that I run every day that tells me when there is new dependency. Like I just ran it before going in, and I just see that TestNG just released an update. They had one yesterday. They just released another one today, a 0.1 update. So they must have found a bug. So automatically, I will update the TestNG extension, later on today. So we work differently, and that's, I think, is the beauty of BLD, is that being a pure Java system, we don't require you to learn new syntax, new this, new that. I think if you're familiar with Spring, if you're familiar with Maven, it's pretty easy to pick up the concepts. The thing that's really interesting is if you look at the code, it uses the builder pattern for Java extensively. So the tool is called BLD, and it uses the builder pattern throughout the entire thing. So which I think is, I don't think that was intentional. Maybe it was, but and so we're not personally, and that's my take on it. Is having converting so many projects, it made my life so much easier. I was getting to the point where I was spending more time on my Gradle files, on my Gradle build file, that I was putting on my code, and it's just like I don't even care about it anymore. I mean,
no, the idea with the multi-source is I mean, in my regular project, this was very specific kind of a project, and I'm just exploring the ideas, because what I did for fun, maybe I mentioned this already, the org JSON library, right? So this is like a small JSON library. This is the reference implementation, and ST-Lurry, I think, is the GitHub organization. And what I did for fun, I cloned the library. And then inside source main Java, I created an app with main method, and it worked without compiling. It means, I could use the library from source, like JavaScript.
Just do a Java, no CP, just the directory.
Just directory. Yeah, I was in the right directory, and then I used Java without CP, Java app.java, and it worked. And I think, okay, that's interesting, because so with Builder, so what's missing in my case, sometimes I need an external library, right? And for that, we could use Builder. So we could say, okay, download this and then cache it, but everything else is source. So I don't need to compile. I mean, Java compiles behind the scenes, but I don't have to do this. But this is...
No, you just build your run and then you go to go.
And this was it's just an idea. This is not, I don't think it is necessary for commercial projects, but if you use Java as a tool, to automate things, this could be nice, because then you have just a folder of things you can quickly edit and run it, right? So this is like
I mean, in a way, what you're talking about is a little bit like the .groovy files. Where you can write scripts, or even the .kts files, for Kotlins, and basically where you can run fairly easily little scripts, just like a bash script with a .sh or whatever, and you can run it fairly easily that way. I mean, I definitely I could see a use case for that. Ah, that's interesting. I'll definitely mention to Gert. You should come to the channel and we should talk about it.
Because I
I
had
think,
already chat with him and he misunderstood. I explained him this like we are doing this like again, not really, but right now they're like two parts. But it is not really
yeah,
necessary. But I think it is worth exploring, right? So that we can say, okay, we have like a scripting mode where compilation happens behind the scenes. Okay.
yeah, and one of the advantage of using build run is that you can also specify arguments. You could do that dash args, and you can specify arguments just like you would do on the main main thing. So you have the whole you have the whole shebang right there, and then you don't have to worry about dash cp because we do that for you. Yeah, I can see your point. I definitely can see your point.
What is standalone scope?
So the standalone scope, let's see. So the standalone scope, I believe, is when you do the web apps.
Okay. Because
Yeah,
everything is like
yeah,
Maven.
when you do,
There's a like compile and we have runtime
yeah,
and test.
yeah, and so when you do the web apps and you want to include like the resource directories and all of that, like
okay.
the templates and so forth, that's where standalone comes into play. And now we've also in BLD 19.0 we've added the provided. So you can include like your APIs and stuff like that. That like like the the J2EE API that you would not need in your you would not need in your runtime or your standalone version of your web app. So we've added that. That's actually something that I needed for the Spring Boot integration. I created a Spring Boot plugin that lets you create a boot jar and boot wars directly in Builder, and I needed the ability to download the jars and the wars in Spring. They use their own launchers. They don't use your typical. So I needed to be able to include that in the extension. So when you build it, it will be able to get that dependency back into the extension, into your project. Yeah. So that's my main reason why we added it. I mean, overall, we realize it's a long shot, right? It's not. We Gradle and Mavens are and as you mentioned, for enterprise people and everything, they may not have a choice.
Yeah.
It may already be the tool that's in use.
Yeah.
We're just hoping that we get enough traction that some people start using them for their own project, like you are doing. You'll be hissed, and then how programmers' brain work, right? They'll figure out a way to make it work for companies too.
Yeah. So, would you like to make it commercial, or what's the idea? So, why are you so interested?
No, I don't think there's any idea. I don't think there's anything of making it commercial. I mean, we haven't really talked about it. I mean, I think it'd be in the realm of possibility if it became extremely popular. But I think both him and I are very much in the open source. But if it was getting traction and there was a potential of making a commercial branch out of it or whatever, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibilities. But right now we just little by little, try to do little articles and get as much publicity as we can. So a lot of it comes with integration with tools. That's just like that example that I gave you that just came up last week. To just showcase that you're not tied to a specific build system. So the bigger issue, in my opinion, is getting to work with something like Android would be so hard. The number of plugins that is in the Android Studio is like Google has done a terrific job with it, but it's just like for us to be able to do that would be extremely difficult with just the two of us working on the code.
Yeah.
But
you mentioned extensions. So how extensions are working in BLD and how they can. What is the plugin mechanism or extensions, or what is it?
So basically you just extend a class. And you just go ahead and create an operation. So, for example, for like PMD, for example, that I'm a big fan of. I've been involved with that project for a long time.
Are you committed to PMD?
A long time ago, but I know the original authors and everything. I mean, this is, BLD started about the same time I started the blog, so the people I knew very well. Not anymore. I mean, I think he's no longer in charge of it, but I've used PMD for years. So, for example, I just created a PMD operation that extends an abstract operation in BLD. And from then on, you just have a few things to fill out. When you extend the abstract operation, you have two things to fill out. You have something which I forgot exactly the name, but where you build the command list, and you have one to execute. So I think it's like execute parameter list and execute, and that's it. That's the only thing you have to fill out. Everything else is on your own. So, for example, for me, something like PMD, what I would do is I would go and look at all the CLI or all the API calls, and I would just create functions for those. So usually what I do, for example, if it's a string, or if you can use multiple string, I'll do like a string argument and a collection. So I'll do two functions, right? Overwritten functions, and then just build that up. It's a little process intensive, right? But so I build every single function available. This way you can go and say, new PMD operation dot, for example, I don't know, class pass, and then, put your class pass dot this, dot this, dot this, dot execute. That's it. It's going. So it's pretty straightforward. I mean, it's.
But in the abstract operation you have to implement, you have the switch statement which calls the functions, or you
no. As I said, the only two things you only have two functions that you have to override, which is the building of the parameter list and the execution function.
Yeah, but you get the parameter list from outside, right? From builder, I guess, right?
The parameter list you get, that's yours.
Yeah, but
so that's basically
but from run, right? If you do build a run,
well, that's a parameter list that you would pass to the run function.
But you get it back to the extension. So you pass build a run, and you get your own parameters in the extension. So if you have
yes, you could do that too. What I'm talking about is actually the parameters that you would pass to Java.
Yeah.
Right. So the CP, all those things like that, which you may not need, and also the parameters that you would pass after calling your tool or your API.
Yeah.
Right. So like if you call testng, you will do, org.testng, and then you would have parameters after that, so yeah, that's it.
But
so you're still in control of it. The only thing it does is it takes that parameter list and pass it to the Java tool.
Yeah. And now we are inside a Java tool. Let's say we said PMD. So we have an extension and I get all the parameters. So within the operation, so now I can do whatever I like. But what you did is you have an if statement or switch statement inside which calls the PMD, or what you did exactly, or you have multiple functions.
No. So basically what I do is, for example, I'm going to create an option array.
Yeah.
Right. So every time you called one of those functions, I will add or remove to that array. Right. So it will build up my command line. So .cp blah 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 .h .p, and I'm gonna, when I'm done, that's what I'm returning. That function returns that information, and BLD internally we use that information.
Yeah,
that's basically it.
But the extension, you build the extension which calls the PMD, right? PMD does know nothing about your extension, so it expects.
No, it doesn't. It knows nothing. It just expects you to give him a list of parameters. That's it.
But you created functions, you said, right?
Yes. So in order for you to be able to set parameters, I have to create functions, right? So as I said, you would do like PMD operation dot, and then whatever parameters, say files, class pass, and blah blah blah.
And the PMD operations is already the functions you have in PMD, right? This is not the.
No, that's the one I created.
Ah, okay. So in your extensions, you have lots of functions.
Yep.
But you have to call the function. So there's like a dispatch, because what I think the extensions is like command pattern. There's one entry point, do something, and you are done, right?
So once again, it's using the builder pattern, right? So every single function returns an instance of that function, of that class. So you have a PMD operation. Say, for example, I need to have a class pass option. So I'm going to do a class pass. That's going to return a PMD operation,
Mhm.
right? And in the class path as the parameter, I will have the class path parameters. So to make it easier, for example, I'm going to set up as a string argument, right? Or as a collection. And then basically the only thing I'm doing is I'm holding all those parameters either in a variable and something that I'll deal with. But basically each time I'm returning an instance of that class. So each time you call PMD operation dot something, it's going to return an instance of PMD operation until you get to the execute part.
Yeah.
That one actually executes, doesn't return it. Well, it returns errors and so forth. But that's it. So once again, extensive use of the builder pattern.
Yeah. And the entry point is already the builder pattern, or is the builder pattern happens inside the operation?
So basically, what you're doing when you're calling it within your build file is you say new PMD operation. And if you don't have any parameters, you do go dot execute. And that's your command.
And the execute is like the built-in builder pattern. So you are gathering, all the state, and in the end you have everything you can validate, and then you shoot for it, right?
And so we have the ability in Builder to create custom commands, build commands. And so that's what you do. You create a new custom command, you call it PMD, and inside there you do new PMD dot execute. And that's it.
What I only wanted to know is the builder pattern was your design decision how to build the PMD extension, or this is the way to go for all extensions?
This is the way Gert did most of Rife.
This is what my misunderstanding. Whether what I thought is if the extension is like if the extension is an API, and usually you have to implement the API, and this is like method do something.
This is a lot simpler. I mean, as I said, when you extend the abstract class, you just have two things to overwrite. And if you're not doing anything in the execute, you don't even have to. You just have to call super. That's it. So 99% of the time, the only thing I'm doing is building the command list, and I'm not doing anything in the execute portion. I'm just calling super.execute. That's it, because I don't need to make any modification to that. So it's extremely simple when you look down to it. Now, simplicity doesn't mean that you can't do very complex things. I do very complex things. But it has nothing to do with Builder itself. It's just my code, that's executed in the extension.
How Builder finds the extensions?
I have no idea, to tell you the truth. That's something that Gert did. I suspect he has a loading system. I've never looked at it, so I'm not sure.
I suspect service loader in Java. So this is.
I don't think so, because he doesn't have a service file in the jar. So I don't think so. I'm not quite sure how he's loading it up. Yeah, it's a good point. I should probably look into it. I don't know if I don't think he's got. He's got. I don't think he's got plugin for Rives, or. So yeah. So I'm not quite sure what he decided to implement. How he decided to implement it. So you just basically have to. There's a property file that you edit, and you just put your extension there and the version number. It's a lot. It's defined a lot like a dependency in Maven. com.blah.blah.blah.: and the version number. And once you do that, once you recompile, it will automatically download the extension from Maven, and you're good to go.
Now, fun question: do you thought about parallelism or concurrent execution of extensions, something like this?
No, I really haven't thought about it, but I'm not quite sure. Are you talking about potentially an extension calling another extension?
Whatever, right? That you can parallelize things, maybe, right? In larger projects. So,
in larger projects, you have things running at the same time. Yeah, we've talked about implementing like caching. Like right now, when you do a build a compile or run, it will run everything. So there's no caching. So we've talked about potentially implementing some form of caching. So if there's no change to the code, for example, no need to recompile it if it's already compiled and things like that. And I guess that running thing in parallel would be in line with that. As far as calling extension with another extension, I've actually done it because you can actually override, extension functions to call other things. So that's pretty straightforward to do it. For example, the testng extension actually overrides the builder test operation, which is the general test thing. There's a test operation, a JUnit operation. And since it's an extension, it actually overrides the main test. So when you do BLD compile test, it will call testng and not JUnit. But you could technically run both at the same time too if you create your own command.
Yeah.
So you could have a portion that runs in JUnit and portion that runs in. Yeah, it'd be a nightmare to manage.
Yeah, but unit is a good one, right? We could parallelize unit tests, for instance.
Yes, you could. I mean, right now there's a lot of things that can be done for to handle larger projects, but I have to admit that the compiling speed is so quick.
Yeah, it is.
That I think you would have to look, because we actually have example of running multiple projects together.
Mm-hmm.
Building multiple projects in one build file.
Well, how you do it?
So if you look at Rife, for example, the way he builds it is he's got two different projects that builds it together, and you just basically have two different build files.
Mm-hmm.
That's basically it. And so so it's definitely doable to have multiple sections, if you will, sub projects. Not a problem whatsoever. Once again, what I want people to understand is this is pure Java.
Yeah.
The limit is the Java limit. It's nothing else.
Yeah.
The only thing that limits you to do something is your ability to write it in Java. That's it. And so when I was converting projects and I was looking at scripts that I had in build.gradle, I had bunch of things. Like I like creating a deploy folder, for example. Well, like from my web applications, what I do is I create a deploy folder, and when I build the jar, I put everything into that deploy folder. Configuration files, jar files. Like often, what I do is I create a main jar file and also have a lib folder that has all my dependencies. I don't include them as a Uber jar; I have them separate. It's easier for me to update, when they're online. So I went and to do that in Gradle took multiple steps. Multiple tasks, to be able to do that. To do that in Builder was so simple. I mean, it's just like then it's got built-in function to copy directories. That's built into it. So you just copy what you need to copy, and it's like 5 lines of code. Before it was like 5 different tasks to do the same thing.
This is what I wanted to do today. Actually, it's like I copy my Uber jar somewhere. And then the second thought was, no, I will use Builder as my launcher, because I Builder run. So I consider Builder being an build tool, an app in one. So I will ship everything. And the origin idea was to have, an Uber jar with a script in my path, and I run the script, but with Builder, I think it's good enough for automation tools. This is why I exploring the idea, how to use it. And I have actually another interesting project, and this is a serverless template application. And how this works is my serverless Java project are Maven projects, and they are 2 almost independent projects. So imagine AWS Lambda on Quarkus. It is just, or without Quarkus. Without Quarkus, just a Pojo, plain. It's like one method, Pojo, nothing else, void and whatever, and you have object in, and you're done. And you can have, business logic there. So in some projects, hundreds of classes. So, but the other part I call CDK, Cloud Development Kit, and this is the infrastructure. And the infrastructure is another Java project with AWS dependencies. And if I run it, I get the configuration which provisions the cloud. So I get, after running the project, the cloud is ready and everything is deployed. In Maven, there is a small problem in my approach or problem is actually works as designed right now, but I don't think which is a good idea or not. Sometimes there are shared properties. Assume I would like to have, environment entries, key value pairs as infrastructure as code, and Lambda use that, so the keys have to be shared. So in Maven, I'm too lazy, because in Maven, I will have to create a third project and superpom and have a jar with the enum shared by both. And what I don't like there is, because I have to either have the superpom in the right order, or always think, to build the enum first, then clear the caches, or the two other projects have the right reference, right? And maybe in Builder would be the killer feature, because I could have, easily share the enum between both projects. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you could. And you also have, there's Builder loads property files automatically. Mm-hmm. So like if you create a property file, the .property files in your main directory, it will automatically load it, and it'll be available to all your projects.
Yeah, also.
Mm-hmm. So if you have some things like passwords and things like that, right, that you need to share between multiple projects, makes it extremely easy. I mean, as a matter of fact, what I do on my personal machine is, since a lot of the stuff is like, my Maven Central password, my GitHub passwords and things like that, keys, passwords, I actually have it located in my home directory, and I just make a symlink. So when I create a new Builder project, I just make a symlink to it. So I just have a single file that's used by 60 different projects. So, that's another option. But I see what you're saying, and I think it's totally doable currently in Builder. And you won't have the problem of having to have things run in a specific order. That won't be an issue whatsoever.
What I'm curious, my project is running here, just for the listeners, what I will do is time run the project, but run is already problematic. Okay. So it compiled, ran my business code, which converted JSON to HTML. So something happened with JSON library in 1.8 second. So this is this is business code involved. This is you will never achieve this with Maven, I would say. And if we just go time builder, let's say compile, right? Then it was 1 second. So the project with the JSON, and it was a small Java tool, 5 classes, and a JSON library. And this is Java E library. It's called the Ason from Eclipse. I use a lot. It compiled in 1 second. So everything. And which is quick.
I mean, that's the thing. I have a fairly large project that I've converted. And the largest one I have is probably a Kotlin project. And I for some reason, I converted it, and I was using that, and I had to go back. Something wasn't working right, so I had to go back to a previous version that was running Gradle. And I remember starting IDE and then just having to wait. It does the Gradle loading, and it's loading everything, and it's just like, I feel like I need to go get coffee and come back, right? Before I could even hit run, right? But in BLD, the other thing I do is I go in the terminal, I type /BLD, compile, and that's it. It's compiling.
But I have to say, this is not, the success of BLD is Java C is crazy fast, right? This is also we have to say.
Yeah, but that's the trick. It's not us. Yeah. It's just it's crazy fast. And same with Kotlin C. Yeah. The compiler is crazy fast, but you don't see that when you use IntelliJ.
Yeah.
You because you got this whole thing that it's doing, like building indexes and everything, and like running tests, for example, which is probably the thing that you do the most often, right? It just waiting.
This is a good point. The test is the killer feature. Because if you run with Maven test, it also does something behind the scenes what I have no idea what. But if it comes immediately, this is the killer feature. Unit tests.
So when I'm running it inside IntelliJ IDEA, right? I'll go and hit the run button on the IDEA, right? And usually I can go and type BLD test and have the result faster than the IDE. It's just like, I was like, why am I even bothering the only time where it's helpful is when you want to run the debug on it, right? And you want to be able to debug with it. Um, but so basically my new setup, in my either Visual Studio is I always have the terminal window open now, because each time I need to do something, I'll just go BLD compile, BLD run, BLD this, and it just works out great that way. So my goal is to work on a IntelliJ IDE extension. That's on my to-do list. I'm gonna try to keep it pretty simple, but just have all the functionality available in a toolbar or in a panel, so you can click on run and everything. And we already have that functionality built in BLD, so I can use it to know what, because since you can create your own commands, it's not always the same commands, right, that are available to you. So it's at first I think it's going to be pretty basic as far as being able to run things and compile things directly from that. And what else I can come up with, as far as doing a little bit of integration. But that's going to be it.
I started now a unit test, and the initialization time was 4 milliseconds.
Yeah.
This is a huge difference. So this is, one downside of the indexing. You don't get, of course not, code completion for the dependencies, right? So this is because
Well, I mean, so this is the thing. Is like when you open your project in IDE, you get all the information, right? Yeah. It grabs everything, even the extension stuff, because it's included. So when you go to the extension, if you want to write your own extension, you have current completion and everything. Even though it's kind of a separate project, we have it. We have the template for the typical project.
No, what I mean is, if you go scope test include dependency, and you have to specify a string org JUnit Jupyter, for instance, right? And the version, so you cannot get the code completion. You have to write an extension for the IDE. But in Maven POM,
yes, probably.
Yeah, but in Maven POM,
I know what. Okay, at that point now you
but
don't.
In Maven,
but as far as Java code completion, you get full of that.
Wait a sec. So you don't get anything there. So because there's include dependency, and the dependency comprises 3 parameters: string group ID, string artifact ID, and the version number. So you won't get it from the IDE. But I got the second idea, because my dependencies.
I get that.
So what
you must not use,
because my dependencies, I always have the same dependencies. So what I could do, right? I could have an enum with dependency and prepare the enum in a new project. I pick just the enum, and I would, I can maintain the dependencies as code.
Well, I do that all the time.
Yeah, but I'm new to Builder, right? So this is just a fresh idea, right?
So, for example, like Kotlin. Kotlin is an example. We have bunch of libraries. They all have the same version number. So I create a variable var Kotlin equal 1.9.23, and in all my dependency, instead of using a version, this is what I'm using. My Kotlin version variable. I do that all the time.
Even better.
So you could do that,
Eric. What we could do, we could look up the current version, and before Builder builds, it sets the recent version and build then.
Okay. All right, so I got you on that one. I actually have a script that I run that updates all my projects at once. And it's written in Builder. I run it as a Builder run, right? It's a separate project, and it actually goes in and find all of my projects and goes and updates all the Kotlin versions or all the Gradle versions, because I have some projects that have examples that are still using Gradle for the examples. So I have 3 examples. I have a BLD example, a Kotlin Gradle example, and a Java example. So all of those things get updated all at once, because I'm tired of having to go in and update all the build files, all the time. So you could definitely do that. You could even create your own extension to do that. Now, the thing that we haven't touched upon that it might be interesting for the listener to know is that one of the things that I ran into in Gradle is getting notified when there's new dependencies. It seems like it's
new versions.
You kind of have to use
new versions, or
new version. It seems like you have to use a plugin to do it. And in Builder, it's automatically when you do build, the BLD update, it will automatically tell you if there's new version of your dependencies. So you can make a decision whether you want to use them or not. That's something that I pushed for, because that was every single one of my project. I think it's using the Gradle extension by Ben Maines that basically checks for dependencies. What I've noticed, for example, is that's something that's built in Android Studio. In Android Studio, when you go into your configuration file, it will actually tell you that there's a newer version of one of the Android SDK dependencies. So just little FYI.
Another spontaneous idea, because imagine there is a problem with newer version of dependency, or even worse, you forgot to update the dependency, and you have a node 2.1, and now we have 5, and in one point your code breaks. So what we could do with Builder, we can have a for loop and increase the dependency run tests, right? And then
so actually I have done that. I have projects
it's a pity. I would also have my own idea.
I have projects that depending on which version of the JDK you run, you need a different version of the library. The dependencies. So what did I do? I just created a for loop. If the JDK's version is this, use this one. If it's not, use that one. But we also do that all the time for Maven. For example, for the repository itself, we have a for loop that determines whether if your version of application ends in the snapshots, then it will use the snapshot directories. And if it's a regular, it will put in a release. So it's an if loop. Basically says
statement. What I'm saying is for loop, because imagine.
I
could just increase the dependency. It's like I'm on 2.
Actually, in mine. I actually did a switch, right? Because it's I did a switch because
But let's say I have dependency. Let's say dependency PMD, and I rely on PMD 1, and now we have PMD 5. And I try to upgrade to 5, but it breaks, and I have no idea which is the last dependency which worked. So what I could do, a for loop, a proper one, and increase the versions, and download the versions, and rerun the tests. And in one point, it will break. And now we know, since this version doesn't work anymore. You know what I mean?
Well, once again, this is exactly why we created BLD.
Yeah.
It's pure Java. The sky is the limit. Yeah. Whatever you can do in Java, you can do into a build file. Yeah. So those few examples that you came up, just like that, off the cuff, is something that is super easy to do in BLD, because you just have to write the Java code for it. That's it.
Yeah, but for listeners, maybe it doesn't occur because we are trained, to have the build definition in XML, and we cannot touch it. The difference in Builder is that so I go to the source code. So the difference to the Builder is if we have an Builder project that extends project.
It's a class.
Yeah. So scope test. So the dependencies are declared there, but this is a Java code. So it means before I say scope, let's say compile, I can do whatever I like. I can use I can call HTTP client or read my property files, get the information.
Download whatever you need to download, whatever you need to do.
And even cool project, let's say proof of concept, you would like to have performance tests, various JSON implementation, one API, 3 different. So you could have, a kind of a loop over the 3 SPI, service provider interfaces. You load them on demand, run the test, clean and do. So you can, this is more like,
And on top of that, you could fully automate the whole process because you could actually create your own command, and you could say, with your own command that runs the different tests in a succession. And you could do all kind of crazy stuff too. I mean, you could actually remember the return. Like say your test returns a value that's milliseconds or whatever. You could keep that and actually have it automatically tell you which one was the fastest. So, for example, you'd be using compression. You'd be using a compression algorithm, right? So you'd be using different compression flags. Which one is the more efficient? You could definitely do that directly into your build file. And depending on the state of your project, or even for other people building your project, different platform, different libraries, different things, you have different results.
So what do you achieve right now? Everyone is going to delete Gradle and Maven, and you have no vacations, no vacations anymore. Everyone will take Builder now.
That's what we want.
Yeah. And it works great, almost great with Visual Studio Code. I had to refresh the dependency a few times in Visual Studio Code, but it worked then. So it is good enough. Not perfect, but good enough. But this is the fault of Visual Studio Code. It didn't recognize there are no new jars. So I had to push, the refresh button, and then it worked.
Yeah.
What's also appealing, really, I already mentioned that, but I like a lot. You see all the jars in a folder. So, I downloaded, I wanted to have the Yason, but the Yason has transitive dependencies to 5 other jars. And you see everything in one folder, which is really nice because you can package, if you like, everything to one jar, if you like. And then you have an Uber jar, which also happens by Builder.
Yeah.
What's also nice is the aesthetics of unit tests. So if you launch Builder tests, you see a kind of report. It's crazy quick. So this is the aesthetics are also nice. So I would say, for the listeners, give it a shot. And how to give a shot? What I did is download the jar builder from GitHub. This is on the Builder instruction page, Java minus jar. And then I created an app, Hello World, and you can play with it, right? And
so if you wanted to install it globally, you can actually download it directly. We have a bit of bash code.
Yeah.
To download it directly, and then it's installed automatically, and then you can create as many projects as you want without having to re-download the main jar. And as with Gradle and Maven, once your project is built, it's a fully contained project. There's no need to download anything else. Everything is included within that project,
which is nice. What I really appreciate.
Yeah.
Thank you. So you are hyperactive on Blue Sky. I really enjoy your posts. This is from various topics. Is really nice. Yeah, I think you are the most active on Blue Sky. Maybe, right? No, you.
I don't know. I'm getting a little bit more traction on Mastodon than I do on Blue Sky. The Blue Sky Java community seems to be a little weak.
Yeah, it was a spike, and now it's a little bit more quiet. So
and so I'm finding more information out of Mastodon. Twitter just to me it's always been too fast. Things goes away too fast. So I have a few people that I follow, and that's pretty good. But it seems like overall I'm getting the better response. On Mastodon, but I'm doing all. I'm posting. I'm cross posting on all the platforms. So.
Okay, cool. So thank you. Was a great idea brainstorming session today, right?
Yeah.
What you can do with Builder, and interesting. Because usually I'm against new inventions if they deviate a lot from standard, because then if you are in a commercial project and every software supplier picks an own build to forget it completely. But Builder is different. You can consider Builder even as a more standard because it's actually Java without anything, right? It's just a little bit more syntactic sugar around what's there. And also for automation projects, whatever, this is actually the way to go. Then the Maven configuration is almost longer than the Java code, which is funny enough completely different in the Quarkus commercial projects where we have a view dependencies and you should actually try Quarkus with Builder if you have time, because
Yes, I was actually looking into it when I was looking at the how to get the Gradle VM images, because they do that in the Quarkus, and that's how I got my information from. So it's on my to-do list to look into it to see how we can integrate with
because Quarkus is crazy fast. So this is I think the Quarkus community will appreciate Builder because Quarkus is about speed, So this is a nice fit.
Yeah. Well, I just I keep my eye open, for all those things to see where we can make integration that would make people's life easier. Well, once again, it goes back to what we were talking about. I like to do things that I use, and to me, if I can have a tool that actually going to make my life easier versus causing me more headaches, I'm going to go with the one that makes my life easier. Now, I have the luxury of being in control of the entire process, which a lot of people are not. But once again, that can change. So I definitely appreciate the feedback. It was great talking to you for the last 3 times. You're very knowledgeable. I appreciate talking with people that have kind of as old of a background as I have, right? Because when I'm talking about older technology, you can pick up right on it. Well, I think a lot of people that are listening, but like, what are they talking about? It's like
One thing
yeah.
what I wanted to mention but forgot is I mentioned Java C. Do you remember Jikes?
Yikes! Of course I do.
Yeah, but what's interesting with Jikes is it was like the crazy fast compiler, which was not always correct, right? So this was from from IBM.
Yeah.
But interestingly, it seems like Java C became faster and faster, or the hardware improved because
Jikes was around.
yeah. Do you think you know what happened? Was have they improved the performance of Java C dramatically, or was it just the hardware gains? You know?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think there's been a lot of improvement because I think there was the Eclipse Foundation when they came out.
Yeah.
You know, they have their own they have their own GIT, right?
Yeah.
And there was a lot of code sharing between the two.
Yeah.
And so I think this is when the just-in-time compilers started coming up. That's when you start. I think that's where you started seeing the dramatic improvement in compiling time. Because I mean, you and I probably remember the days where we were basically using a text editor and Java C.
Yeah, exactly.
Those were our tools.
Yeah.
There was nothing else. I mean, I wrote hours long of softwares that was written with the text editor. And Java C. That's it. There was nothing else.
In my case, Windows was even Notepad at the beginning.
At one point, I was using this tool called JEdit. I don't know if you remember.
But JEdit, I did in a short. It's still around. If you search for
it's still around. But guess what? Since it was written in Java, it had some nice functionality, especially on the refactoring side.
You can take a look on this. I started it recently, last year, actually.
Yeah, it's still a pretty good tool. Yeah. But Java on the desktop, the Java desktop applications never been a big popular thing.
Launch it. It looks actually surprisingly nice. The JEdits.
Yeah, I mean, I used it for years. I mean, it was my to-go tools. Yeah.
Perfect. And Java C is written in in Java. In Java itself. So it will be interesting to talk to the people how they optimize the thing, because this is Java C is a Java app, interestingly.
Well, I think the optimization came with the JIT, the just-in-time compiler, which I think is platform dependent, if I remember right.
It was great to talk to you again. So my entire head is full of new ideas. The problem is I have to do complete different stuff in my work. This is just leisure, but they're still fun. So where people can find you, give the blog.
So the blog is at eric.tauvin.net. That's THAUVIN.net. And as far as the social, eTauvin, pretty much everywhere.
Okay.
LinkedIn, Mastodon, Blue Sky, all of that.
Okay.
Yeah, and then of course on GitHub, eTauvin, you can look at my project. And if you like BLD, make sure to star it.
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, everyone has to star BLD. This is the most important thing. And maybe Rife, right? So BLD first, and then
Rife definitely. Rife. And I mean, seriously, if you guys are looking for a framework that's lightweight, that's no dependency, and that basically covers, I would say, 95% of what you can do in Spring, definitely give Rife a try. It's tested. It's been around for a long time. It's used in commercial projects. I think you'll really enjoy it.
Okay. Thank you a lot. See you next time.
Thanks a lot. Yeah.